Right, welcome back. Now, not so long ago, I interviewed Dr. Susan Oliver from the Back to the Science channel. And in that video, in that interview, I said that she was one of two channels that I literally put head and shoulders above everybody else when it comes to debunking the misinformation that we're dealing with at the minute. And without a blink of an eye, everybody in the chat responded and said, I know who your second favorite must be. And it's not first and second favorite. My two top favorites. You all called it, you said, it has to be Debunk the Funk. And of course, it is Debunk the Funk. And I have the man himself. There we go. That's the direction. Dr. Dan Wilson from Debunk the Funk. We're going to get straight into it, but not until I say just a quick hello and a public thank you for coming and doing this. How are you doing?
Of course, Catz. Hey, what's up? I'm good. How are you? Happy to be here.
Mate, I am. I've been really looking forward to this. Really looking forward to it. And I know your time's precious, and I'm going to try and keep this concise, and I'm going to keep it to the point. My phone is beeping in the background. Hope that didn't get picked up on the microphone. So let's begin. Question number one: you are a genuine PhD, a genuine doctor. You've got a PhD in molecular biology, and obviously you deal with battling misinformation, etc. So we all know your credentials are fantastic. What is your honest opinion about the credentials of the people who are putting the information out, the misinformation out that you are combating? And you know, feel free to name names. We're not here to slag anybody off, but you know, in general, how do you rate their academic standing?
Yeah, so it ranges, honestly. You know, some people like Dr. John Campbell will have a degree in nursing and a degree in education. That's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But they might not have good knowledge of how to adequately interpret results of epidemiology or molecular biology research, things like that. And then on the other hand, well, he's maybe in the middle. And then on the two other extremes, you have people who don't have credentials, like talk show hosts, like Tucker Carlson, or I guess Piers Morgan over on your end of the pond is supporting some of this stuff now. People have no credentials who just say stuff that they hear. And then on the other extreme, you do have people who have genuine degrees, who have done genuine work in fields of medicine or science, who are now just saying crap. And so there's a wide range of expertise that you can find in the world of misinformation. But what I always say is it comes down to content, right? If I go to a conference and I'm listening to a Nobel laureate speak, and he suddenly starts telling us that, you know, DNA actually has 3 strands. It's not a double helix, it's a triple helix. And we actually came from Mars. I'm going to be like, wait a minute, this guy might not know what he's talking about. So you have to go by the content of what they say and not just by the credentials. But I think the majority of people who spread misinformation out there do not have the expertise and background necessary to making the claims that they do.
Yeah, and I suppose Dr. John Campbell is a prime example. I used to use him in my classroom when I was a teacher. I used to show when he was doing educational videos, and absolutely super. You know, they were just the perfect thing, pitched at the right level for the kids I was teaching. And he's obviously been very successful in nursing. He's obviously an intelligent guy, you know, but you know, you wouldn't ask a professor in speaking Spanish to translate a German essay for you. You know, the completely different skills. And I suppose it's the same with John. But you know, he does seem to be prominent, doesn't he? So the other way around, then, these people you talk about, they've got a range of experiences, a range of skills. Your name is out there. When I'm looking on Twitter, I often see people like Steve Kirsch mention your name. Lots of people mention your name. You are really well known amongst all of these figures, and I'm assuming that's because of the quality of the information you put out and the manner in which you put it out. So, given that you are well known by them, how do they treat you? Do they treat you with the respect that your background deserves?
Well, generally, my interactions with these people tends to go downhill eventually. So I guess I'll just explain. When I started my channel, I did have a kind of a more idealistic outlook on the conversations I'm going to be having. Because when I started my channel, I thought, oh, I'll just have like, a couple hundred subscribers. It'll be a small thing for me to do on the weekend. It'll be fun for me to do. I like teaching through explaining why misinformation is wrong. So it'll be fun for me. And then, that was just before COVID happened. And then I think because of COVID, my channel kind of got bigger than I was expecting it to. And then I started encountering people like Steve Kirsch, and a bunch of other people on the internet who are spreading misinformation. And I actually talked to Steve Kirsch using him as an example over Zoom once back in like 2021, and it was for a good like 2.5 hours. We just talked, and it was very civil, which is exactly the kind of conversations I wanted to make sure I have through my channel. I did not want to ever I wanted to always just talk from a point of I'm talking to this person as an equal, as a respectable human being, all that good stuff. But then Kirsch, takes my name and starts putting out he says this and he can't explain this. Why can't he explain it? And just he starts becoming really childish and really, really just an awful, weird, stalkery person to not just me, but a lot of other people. And so that was just one example along the way where I'm like, maybe this blanket nice approach isn't so great. Because I realized that a lot of people are going to try to take what you say, no matter how nice you are. They'll try to take it out of context. They'll try to clip it and use it in misleading and deceptive ways just to further their own goals. So I thought, okay, I have to kind of change my approach here. I had to figure out if this person is being earnest and honest in their questions. If that's the case, cool. I'll talk to you all day. I'll be as nice as possible. Like it'll be all good. But if they're not, if there's someone like Steve Kirsch, then I gotta kind of turn it on them and say like, okay, you're claiming this. You need to explain how this works. Like if you don't understand how this works, then you have no business making these claims at all. And I need to hold their feet to the fire and kind of make sure that they stick on that. Because yeah, it's because they don't exactly treat experts like experts. They treat them as people to catch out in any way possible to misrepresent to their audience and have it benefit them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've encountered a lot through doing my channel, is people who don't really who aren't interested in treating others with other people who disagree with them with respect, and having honest conversations with them and actually learning about these topics, because unfortunately it's easy to monetize misinformation. So that's kind of been my experience with a lot of these people who spread misinformation, but I have had good conversations with people who thought twice after talking with them. So hopefully that answers the question of how people generally, I think, treat people like me. People on the misinformation side generally treat people like me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I personally think that a lot of the best conversations do kind of happen behind closed doors, or when when things tend to be more in private. When things are public, it does become, and I'm guilty of this. It becomes a point scoring thing. Because you can't be seen to be to be stumped or have somebody get the better of you and anything. And but yeah, some of the people that I know you've dealt with, I've had the odd two, the odd conversation too, and I've also found this to be extremely childish. Not that I'm one to talk. I know I'm quite childish in my videos, but on a one-to-one level in a conversation, you think you can turn that off.
And just to like make sure people understand what I mean by childish, I mean like, people like Kirsch will do things like show up at a medical doctor's house uninvited multiple times and just be like, I want you to answer these questions. And then they have to call the police on him so that he leaves them alone.
Steve's done that. Steve has done those things. Oh my word. Wow.
And so it's not, it's not good. It ends up not being good dealing with people like him. And there are quite a number of people like him.
Yes, I think he sounds quite. He's obviously been successful, very successful in one area. He's obviously to be able to do that and do the things he's done in the areas he's been successful in has to be very driven and passionate. Perhaps, maybe one might say obsessive about something, and maybe it's those characteristics that aren't necessarily pleasant in other areas, maybe. But you've spent a lot of time debunking and tackling that misinformation there. You must have seen the same arguments recycle over and over and over again. And I'm never sure why. What is it that keeps well, first of all, which is your favorite or most frustrating argument that you see bouncing over again and again? And what keeps driving them to resurface?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things. One is we keep seeing people who spread that kind of misinformation recycling ideas because, well, number one, they work. They get people afraid of products that they don't understand. And as time moves on, every few years, there's a new audience who is capable of discovering this misinformation. And so when they discover it and there's a new wave of interest, you just restate the same stuff all over again, maybe in a slightly different way. And then people stay interested. Also, with things like the pandemic happening, that was a time when a lot of people were interested in these things, probably for the first time. And so repeating all of these same talking points that have been said for decades and debunked for decades suddenly had a much wider audience all at once for people to kind of get suckered in. And we saw that happening. And then they also just kind of are able to repackage or rebrand the same ideas into new ideas, quote unquote new ideas. And I'll just use my favorite as an example, which is this idea of residual DNA in mRNA products. Because it's really just the same thing as what we've seen with older versions of that product's technology, where, before COVID happened, I made a video about this person who said that residual DNA in regular childhood vaccines would be something that's harmful. And she had this whole argument as to why it's harmful, and it was just not right because it's the same as what we say now. All these products are tested for residual DNA because DNA is involved in the manufacturing of these processes. So you have to kind of chop up that DNA and remove it as best you can, and then it's tested for at the end stages before the drug product gets released. And there are standards that say you can have this much. It can be the average base pair length can be this long, and those are the standards you have to meet. And that's what's been met, not just for newer mRNA versions, but older, like attenuated viral vector products, conjugate or recombinant protein products. It's the same across all of them. But because now we have an mRNA version which uses genetic material, people are already scared of that genetic term. And so when you say like, oh, there's these residual DNA fragments, and now there's these lipid nanoparticles, that makes things different, when it really doesn't. And I've gone through the specifics of all that stuff on my channel, and you've done that to some extent on your channel as well. But you can see how, like, the old version of, oh, it's just residual DNA from a cell. You can make an argument of how that's scary, but now it's residual DNA from a plasmid. It has these specific elements that match up, that have the same names as a scary virus. So, and they're wrapped in these lipid nanoparticles. That's super spooky. So you can see how they kind of like can take pretty much the same argument and just repackage it to a different situation, and it has a different impact.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. In terms of the arguments, it's not just the recycling of old arguments. It seems to be the volume. So I saw I think it was on Steve Kirsch's bio, either on Twitter, and if it wasn't Twitter, I saw it somewhere, maybe on a website, where he'd written, or he'd stated that he'd written 1,200, I think it was, articles on, the whole product and the surrounding science. John Campbell obviously puts out numerous videos a week.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take you to research one of your videos, which are very thoroughly and properly researched? And how do you think they can get through their research to produce such a volume of work so quickly?
It's so I think to answer the latter part of that first, I think they're able to churn out as much content as they do because it is sloppy. It is not well researched, and it's just really quickly almost copy and pasted from someone else who already made claims. That's what John Campbell does, especially. He will wait for some paper to get interpreted one way, or someone to write a Substack about something, and then he kind of just like, does what he does. He prints out a paper and uses a fountain pen to underline things, and talks about it as if it's a big revelation. And the sloppiness kind of shows when he does things like upload a video claiming that there are nanobots and then he has to remove it because even the people on his side are saying, John, this is too crazy. You're getting this too wrong. But for me, it varies. If it's a topic that I already know a good bit about, like if it's a topic that's been recycled and now it's getting popular and I think it's worth addressing, I might already have a lot of resources and a lot of background knowledge on that topic. And so I can kind of, research, film, and edit a video all in a week. But then there are other situations where, like as of filming this now, I have a video that I just finished making. I'm going to upload it in a couple days about one of Joe Rogan's recent podcasts where he had people who support the Make America Healthy Again movement on. And they made a wide range of topics, a wide range of claims on a lot of different topics. And so I had to ask people who have expertise in agriculture, people who have expertise in medical fields, in nutrition and diet, and in law even. Like, am I getting this right? Are you, like, I had to double check, not only in what I was reading, but also I had to ask people to make sure that I got those things correct. And that's taken me I've been working on it for probably like 3 weeks now. So it takes a good amount of time. And that's a situation where I've been working on it consistently, almost every night, or like after my kids go to bed, almost every night, or at least at some point throughout the day working on it. So it takes a good amount of time to actually sift through and debunk this stuff. But for the other people, it's not the same standard. They can just kind of say things and people will believe them. It's gotten to that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's very easy. I mean, I can tell you now, I've got a naked fairy dancing the Macarena in my back garden, or whatever it's called. And, it took me no time just to say that and make it up. But for you to debunk it, the amount of time it would actually take you to prove that's not true and it's always going to be the lion's share of the work, isn't it, on the side of the fence that is actually, trying to find out what is going on, that it's very frustrating. Stuff can be thrown out so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've kind of touched on this already. How do you decide what is worthy of making a video on and what is you happy just to let pass?
Yeah, it'll depend. Sometimes I want to make a video about something that I'm interested in, that I think would be fun to make a topic about. And sometimes that's all the thought that goes into it. I'll just say, like, I like this topic. I know a bit about it. I think it'll be fun to research it a little more and put together something. Other times it's what I see going most viral. Like if I have limited time and I'm getting a lot of, I get emails from viewers sometimes asking me to cover some things. And if I have limited time and I have a few video ideas that I'm not sure of what I'm going to do, and then I suddenly get a lot of emails, people asking me to cover something that they're seeing, I might think, okay, maybe if this is getting a lot of traction, I should at least put something out so that I'm contributing to the pushback on whatever bit of misinformation is getting popular.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two different avenues I use to decide what I want to do.
And once you've chosen a topic, are there any arguments that you've listened to and thought, okay, that sounds bad, I know that it's not going to be right, but you've actually struggled to understand why it's why? So is there anything that's really challenged you?
I think I don't know if, well, it's always challenging to kind of explain why a bit of misinformation is wrong in a way that's concise and understandable to a non-expert audience. Like for example, it's been a challenge to think through, like, okay, people who think that viruses don't exist, how exactly do I explain it to them, like what they're missing? And nowadays I think that it's kind of formulaic for me to talk to someone who might believe something like that and walk them through it. But the process of getting to that point where I now can do that has been a challenge. I struggle to think of something that was really like a really challenging thing that I heard and didn't know how I was going to deal with it. Partly because a lot of, like we said earlier, a lot of these arguments are recycled. It's not really often that I hear something that's completely new from these people. And before I started making my YouTube channel videos, I was already aware of this world because I was, I was watching your videos and people like you on YouTube. So I knew what people who spread misinformation were saying. I used to believe some of it myself, and that's long gone. But now I'm very familiar with that world in a way that I think a lot of other scientists wouldn't be. So yeah, I'd say it's always a challenge, but I can't think of one particular thing that really jumped out and challenged me on how I'm going to deal with this, because I want to say that there really haven't been many surprises in the past few years in terms of what misinformation is coming out. There have been surprises in ways of like, okay, I didn't think someone was going to make an argument that way, but okay, like it's still wrong and this is why. But yeah, nothing super challenging in the sense of I need to totally rethink how I'm going to explain this.
One thing you said there actually leads very nicely again into the next question. I don't know if you've seen the questions I'm sending you, but I'm asking you, but you're leading in really well. You talked about being aware of that the whole world of people believing in all sorts of things, I suppose, before you started your channel. And one of the things that I've noticed, I used to make videos about silly things, like the earth being flat or whatnot, and I try and make stuff a little bit more serious now. And what struck me is that the kind of information that people like Andrew Bridgen put out, for example, or Dr. Campbell's videos of people who believe it, it's far more likely for the everyday average man in the street to believe it, because the arguments require a lot more understanding. And actually on the surface, it's like, oh, look, my pineapple is tested positive. On the surface, you think, oh, wow, what's going on here? So what's your experience been with that? Do you find that a lot of the people who criticize you are kind of, right-minded thinking people, but they are just lacking that that effort to go and research themselves? Like, what just happened? Do you agree, disagree?
You know, I tend to try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think it's easy to believe that there are a lot of people out there who used to be like me, where like they get sucked into a rabbit hole and they are kind of comforted by a lot of what they hear. Because I remember me, I would be, you know, comforted by a lot of these conspiracy theory thinking type arguments or talking points because they leave you feeling like you understand things. They leave you feeling like the world is simple in a way. Like, oh, you know, there's not a virus out there that um, could I could come into contact with, and it may or may not put me in the hospital. It may or may not take my life. It may or may not, you know, cripple me. Um, it's just fake. It's the government doing it, right? Like that's a much more comforting, simpler answer than a chaotic world that can produce viruses that have a range of potentially unknown effects. It's just it puts the blame on a singular entity that, you know, together with your fellow believers you can fight against. So I tend to believe that a lot of the people like regular commenters or people viewing who are criticizing me are probably down a path that's like that. Like they get sucked into this world of misinformation and they get convinced by it, and it's hard to then break out of that. Um, but it, you know, with the people who are like the influencers who are spreading misinformation and critiquing me, um, I think they have different motives and are not always uh, the gullible, or not always the more gullible observer. They're actively taking part in misinforming people.
Yeah. And like I said before, it's very easy to monetize that, isn't it? Very, very easy. You know, it's you know, a lot of people, sad as they say, will click on a link to see that shocking news. You know, oh, this is horrendous, and to have that kind of rage, you know, than they will to click on a link where somebody says, oh, this is why it's wrong. You know, it's a strange old world. Okay, so leading into that, we come from different countries, and I've spoken to a lot of people from America, and I am assuming you're American, not Canadian. I've made that mistake before and I've been told off.
I am.
Yeah, I'm going to say you.
I am.
Okay. And I remember having a discussion with someone I won't name, and in our discussion, it seemed that we were coming from extremely different places, and well, obviously we are thousands of miles apart, but our arguments were coming from completely different places. So, first of all, in America, when people are promoting or believing or spreading misinformation, the type of misinformation that you deal with, how much of that in America actually comes from a political or a religious standpoint? I know that's quite a generic question, but is that a factor where you are?
Yeah, it's a factor for sure. I mean, there have been data. There have been data showing that the kind of medical misinformation we've seen over the past few years skews heavily to the right wing side, which was weird because I remember in the 2010s when I was getting familiar with that universe of the internet. It was more of a left wing thing, like hippies and people were all into medical misinformation, and right wingers were not so much. And now it's kind of the right wingers have kind of gone over to that as well. And you know, there have been other studies that suggest that conspiracy theories tend to be more attractive to people on the conservative or right wing side, and people who are more religious and that kind of thing. To be honest, I don't know the strength of those data. I don't know how strong those studies are or what the confidence in those gaps are, but that's to my understanding that's what the data tend to show. And in my personal experience online, you know, you see a lot of conservatives having the same talking points. A lot of the deep conservatives, at least, having the same talking points around COVID, around preventative measures, all that kind of thing. So it definitely tends to skew to a certain political ideation.
That does make sense. I've often been criticized. People have, I've been interacting with. Somebody might say something about, PCR. There's too many cycles, and I said, no, you can't have too many. It doesn't matter how many cycles you have. For example, that's not going to change. The cycle code. You can't do that. And then the answer they've come back with is, well, there's no point discussing it with you because you're obviously just a left-wing liberal. I'm like, well, we haven't discussed anything to do with politics at all. Where's that? So I guess that's mirroring what you've just said there. They may see the two integrated.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is, in these past few years, it has been kind of unprecedented, right? Like, I don't think any of us going into 2020 thought that we would actually be staying home, not going to work and trying to, not go out and do things for an extended period of time, let alone the weeks and months that our governments ended up having that go on for. That was a big deal. And I think a lot of people who don't want government in their life, which tend to be on the conservative or libertarian ends, in America at least, fell into those more comforting answers. Like, oh, we don't need government in our lives because the virus isn't that dangerous, or because they are faking the numbers with PCR, or because they are faking the data to whatever ends they want. That was a more attractive explanation, a more attractive worldview for those kinds of people who think that way than, oh, we have to let the government tell us when how we need to reduce numbers of this virus, reduce the spread, reduce the transmission, and reduce the deaths, because we all have to work together to address a communicable disease that is affecting our community. So I think it makes sense that it went that way, but reality is, of course, very different from what people who have those beliefs about PCR and the severity of the virus and faking data and all that stuff. Reality is very different from what they end up believing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I've got 2 questions left. The quick ones, they're not long ones, but first one, when I was speaking to this person I'll not name, who was from America, I asked them, have you seen the data from the Office of National Statistics? We can download the spreadsheet and we can actually look at how effective the vaccines were. And it's just, black and white. It's so obvious how effective they were. And he started talking about, and I don't know how you pronounce it, like the VAERS. Do you just call it VERS? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay.
Yeah, VAERS. Yeah.
And that's, can you just explain to us how that works out? Because over here, the Office of National Statistics, there's nothing self-reported about it. These are official, statistics that we can get, coming from the hospitals. And it's as official as you can get. The VERS is quite well, you tell me, how is it different? What is that?
Yeah, so there are multiple ways to assess the safety of a vaccine after it's been rolled out to the public. And one of the basic first line things is looking at self-reporting data. And so multiple countries have systems like this. In the US, it's VAERS. The US also set up another one called vSafe, specifically for COVID. In the UK, you have the yellow card system.
That's it. Yeah.
Canada has its own. Germany has its own. And what this self-reporting data is just people who, when they get their dose, and then in the weeks after, they just self-report. Like they use the necessary channels set up by the system to report something that happened to them, and it can be anything. And it can be also self-reported. It can also be reported by a doctor, or it can be reported by a lawyer. Those are just some options. But generally, it's any medical event that happens is a reportable event. So if I get my dose and then 2 days later I get a big stomach bug, and I'm home for 3 days and I'm feeling miserable, I can report that.
Yeah.
Now it can be because of the dose I got, or it can be because my kid brought it home from daycare and there's now 3 of us in our household, all experiencing the same symptoms at the same time. So the reporting system does not address causality. It just captures things that happened. And then what epidemiologists or data specialists can do is they can go in and they can look at, okay, are there clusters of things happening that are kind of more than what we would expect had nothing happened?
Yeah.
Right? Like if we told everybody, okay, submit things that happen to you after you have breakfast, would it look any different from what we're seeing if we ask, report things after you get a dose of vaccine? And so then when they do that and they look through the data and they see what we call a safety signal, they can flag that for further investigation. And this is how some genuine adverse events start to get recognized. What it's not good at, what you can't do is you can't say, look at all these events that happened, therefore it's caused by the vaccine, which is what a lot of people who spread misinformation end up doing.
So is there anything in the US that I can direct people to so let me give you an example of what you can do with the Office of National Statistics. I think the data ran up to, with the vaccine data just a few months ago. You can download it and you can look at all-cause deaths by vaccination status. You can look at, well, in fact, all-cause death and then a range of other deaths. And you can look at those who have been vaccinated within different time periods. Those who were unvaccinated, those who only had one vaccine, those who had two. But, and you can build up a really, really integrate picture based on, just death rates. And there's none of this kind of, oh, you were classed as unvaccinated because it was 14 days. It's like, no, if you had a dose, it's on there. And then you can use that data and you can, you can analyze it and you can see that the vaccines have saved, or those who were vaccinated are dying at a far, far lower rate than those who were unvaccinated. Is there anything like an American equivalent where you can grab that just hardcore official cold data that we can send people to, that I can send people to in the US?
Yeah, definitely. So the CDC kept records of that throughout the pandemic. You can go on and download their data from there, but also there are people who have already done studies on that kind of data. And those studies you can find through the Vaccine Safety Data Link, otherwise it's abbreviated VSD. So if you just Google Vaccine Safety Data Link studies, the CDC actually has a page of studies of data from the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which is kind of like the ONS, where it tracks vaccination status and adverse events, and can compare vaccinated to unvaccinated.
Perfect. Right. I'll make sure to send them there. And this is the very, very last one. It's not an easy one. I don't even know. I have no idea how I'd answer this one. But free speech versus the right to limit misinformation. We want to stop misinformation being pumped out, but how do we balance that with free speech? I know you've got the perfect answer, so I'll just leave that with you. It's a difficult one.
I don't know if I have a perfect answer, but my answer is that we do have to balance it. People should absolutely have free speech, but free speech doesn't mean you can just say whatever you want, right? Like if someone is going around saying, I mean, we could come up with all kinds of insane examples, but the classic one people give is you can't yell fire in a movie theater because then everybody's going to stampede, people are going to get hurt, and then you're going to get punished. Even though you have free speech, you're allowed to yell that, but there are consequences for saying that. And so I think that, the best we can do right now is just call it out. Like people are spreading misinformation, the consequences are they're going to get called out, and their claims are going to get broken down and destroyed and made to look like the garbage that it is. But in America, at least, when it comes to medical misinformation, there are some limits, but it's not very good, right? Like, people can't start selling products saying, oh, this is going to cure you of XYZ. That's not legal when it's not proven to even remotely do that thing that it says it does. That's something the FDA can crack down on. But it can get blurry when people are just saying things online. Like, there's no legal consequences for someone online saying shouldn't get them because they're from Bill Gates, and Bill Gates spat in them and he doesn't like you. You can't. There's no like formal punishment for that, even though saying things like that can and does get people genuinely harmed. You can find so many stories and documented cases of not only unvaccinated groups doing more poorly than vaccinated groups in the face of infectious disease, but you can find individual stories of mothers who went onto discussion boards and took the advice of someone, and now their kid is either not alive or in the hospital, or just someone themselves took advice from someone saying X medical intervention is bad, therefore I'm not going to do it, and then they suffer the consequences. There were many examples of even podcasters during the pandemic who would rail against science-based approaches, and then they themselves would lose their lives. I think that in a perfect world, it's reasonable to have consequences for people who spread misinformation that directly goes against what science has established to be true. I don't see how realistically you do it. That's a question for the legal experts, people who write laws. I don't know how to enact something that is fair and works. But I think it's important to recognize that free speech is important, but people who misuse and abuse it can and do cause genuine harm, and there needs to be something, even if it's just people like you and me fighting back against it. There needs to be something against that force.
Well, Dr. Dan Wilson, you have been absolutely brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure just to listen to you speak. And, just in case anybody is watching that doesn't know who Dr. Dan Wilson is, obviously his channel is linked in the description. It's Debunk the Bunk. Debunk the Funk. It's Debunk the Funk. Maybe I'll fix that in the edit. His channel is absolutely amazing. Along with Dr. Susan Oliver, like I said before, the two of them, when it comes to actually really getting a grip of the science properly and really breaking it down properly, really knowing what they're talking about and doing a brilliant job at dissecting it for you. Those two channels, there just are none better out there. So I'm honored that you've come on and spent this time with me, and I've kept you longer than I've said. So I'm going to hit the end recording button now, and I'm just going to thank you again. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Catz. Pleasure being here, and I'll see your videos around.